Right, here we go, day 7. Gosh, we've been over a week already. We're halfway through, actually, exactly. Because, yeah, we had done 6 and we've got 6 Hangouts to go. Right.
Yeah, the halfway point.
We have a viewer. We have a viewer, fantastic.
We have
right, so
29 waiting, I can see.
Oh, okay.
So and we've got lots of people active in the chat window.
Good, good. Have you just put, and if anyone, obviously if someone's watching the chat window, they will have got the link because they're there. But yeah, it might just be worth popping a quick comment in there to say that all the Sotton blogs seem to be down, and hopefully they'll sort it out fairly soon, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, okay.
So we can solve 99% of the world's problems, can't we, Nick? But we can't sort server issues.
Yeah, it's not a bad effort, but unfortunately, this is the one we want to
fix. No point in stressing about things we can't fix. Right. Okay, so hello again then, everybody. 34 viewers, fantastic. Right, so if you're seeing this, you've obviously found the link. I did tweet, 1 or 2 people kindly pointed out they couldn't access the blog. We can't either. So I have tweeted a link, and hopefully if you could pass that round as far as possible, that would be great. Obviously everyone on the course should be on Twitter by now, so no one should miss it. It's one of the great things about Twitter in terms, for real-time communications or situations like this. It's invaluable. Anyway, Nick, you seem to be typing away furiously there. Are there some questions coming through?
Not really, no. I'm just reiterating the fact that the blogs are down, and that could the students pass on the link from Twitter to anyone who may have not seen the Twitter link feed.
It seems to be being retweeted quite actively.
Oh, we had a question from Victoria. It says, "Hi, Nick and Lisa. Would you be able to share on Twitter the things to note for topic 2?
Yes. Well, yes, we can do that because it's quite short. There were specific sections we referred you to in the MOOC, which were 2.2, 2.5. Those are the particularly useful sessions in the MOOC that were relevant to topic 2. And topic 2 is really just a very short statement rather than a question. It just asks you to evaluate the role of, evaluate how you assess quality in terms of online information. So how do you know what to choose if you're faced with a whole page of search results? How do you validate? How do you ascertain whether a source is accurate? How do you choose between a number of different sources that may be saying different things? That's what you're asked to do, basically, for the topic 2 post. Deadline, end of today. Deadline for comments, end of tomorrow. Deadline for reflections, end of Friday. So that's basically what the post says. We're going to talk a bit more about that today anyway, and also give you some initial feedback on the topic 1s, because we've marked probably about half of them so far. I think one of the key points from my perspective is that there's quite a lot of missing self-marking in the ones I've looked at so far. Some people either haven't done it at all, or you've obviously gone in after the first post and you've marked down the first few columns or the first few sections of the table, but then haven't gone back again to complete it for the comments and reflection. So I've found so far a number of incomplete or missing self-marking. So if that applies to you, please pop in there and do that so I can complete the feedback.
And that's the same for me. So I would say roughly about a fifth, so 1 in 5 of the students that I'm currently marking have either got missing self-assessment or incomplete self-assessment. I understand that sometimes it can be really quite tricky to know exactly how to self-assess, especially if, for example, one of your comments falls into the 70 plus column and the other of your comments falls into the 60 to 70 column, and you're like, well, how do I highlight both? Well, what you can do
can highlight
is
both.
instead of highlighting comments, you can just highlight comment, and then you can highlight the sentences in both columns. And that also gives you an idea of the fact that that means you're on that borderline between those two grades as well. So you don't have to highlight the entire sentence. You can pick bits out of the sentence that you want to highlight. But it is important that you try, because it's the act of trying that will get you familiar with the marking criteria and with what's expected of you, and will also get you more comfortable with understanding what grade sort of band is currently sitting. So it's an important thing to do. There's also, of the ones that I've been marking, there is one where there doesn't seem to be any links to the comments that you made. You clearly made the comments, it clearly happened because you talk about them, but I can't find them because you haven't linked to them. So I'll be emailing you shortly after the end of this video to ask if you could address that issue. In the meantime, though, if everybody else could go back and check that they've done their self-marking to a complete level, that would be very useful for us. If you see that your piece has already been marked and it's already got comments on from Lisa or from me, then don't worry too much. But if your piece is still yet to be marked, and those which have incomplete or missing incomplete or missing self-assessment won't have been marked, because we can't mark it until you've marked yourself. So if you could get onto that pretty quick today, that would be a real benefit to us, because it delays our marking otherwise.
Yeah, and I would also add to that that the people who have self-marked, I've been really impressed about how accurate it is. You know, in some cases, I've not changed anything at all, and I think you've obviously given it a lot of thought, and you've done it really well. So yeah, and I've certainly not come across anybody. Sorry, Nick.
Yeah, I was saying I would echo that. I think, broadly speaking, most of you have done a really good job, a really accurate job of self-marking. It's great to see that. In one or two cases, it's not the case, but most of the time, you've been pretty accurate. So good job for those of you who've done that.
Yes, well done. And then when it comes to topic 2, obviously you've got something to benchmark against. You can look back at how you did in topic 1, and you can think, well, you know, are my comments better or worse than they were last time? What did I get last time? Do I need to shift it? And in which direction do I need to shift it? So the hardest bit is doing the first one, definitely. So well done to those of you who've done that.
Yeah, I'd like to add as well that certainly within the ones that I've been looking at, on the whole, again with some exceptions, but on the whole, the use of visuals has been pretty good. Most people have produced some kind of self-produced visuals, mainly infographics at this point. And although we did have one self-produced Powtoons video used very well in the reflection post as a sort of summary of thinking and development, that was excellent. I was very happy to see that. I haven't yet been through everyone, so if there are others who have done that, well done to you as well. But certainly for that particular student, using that Powtoons video that you made yourself, very happy to see that in topic 1. That's great work, and keep that going. Yeah,
that's very true. I would echo that. With just one word of caution, I did find 1 or 2 people who seem to have stuck in just about every possible bit of infographic or image that they could think of, and so the entire post basically had no text at all, which is kind of fine, but possibly slightly overkill. You know, it really isn't about showing how much you can put in. It's about showing, you know, what's appropriate and where. So just don't go too mad, please.
Yeah, I would second that as well. In that any visuals that you use, whether it's a video that you embed from YouTube or a video you make yourself or an infographic or a slideshow or any of these other aspects, even some podcast or audio recording, all of it needs to be relevant. It needs to add and strengthen the points that you're trying to make. So it's not a case of, oh, let's just throw everything I can at this post. They're only really of value if they are bringing something to the post. So in that sense, quality is more important than quantity. Nevertheless, range is important, and I suspect that might be where people are getting slightly confused. In the marking criteria, it does talk about the number of visuals and the range of visuals. So the number of visuals obviously matters. If you've got one or none, that makes a very big difference compared to if you've got a lot more. But the actual numbers are not the more important thing. More important is the range. So are there different types of visuals used, and what sort of value do they bring to the post? Or are they there to strengthen arguments, or are they just to kind of be pretty, or to have lots of images in it because you want to get that higher numbers section highlighted? Quality, not quantity, and range, not quantity.
Yeah, we had a good example. I think it was in the last UK group where a student at the start of the course, she said, "I've never done any of this before. It's all completely new to me. I've got lots to learn. I don't really sort of inhabit the digital world, and I've never used any of these tools." And so she was really open about that at the start. And she said, "I've set myself a target, and I'm going to, for each topic, I'm going to try one new tool, and I'm going to learn it properly. So, for topic 1, I'm going to try one of these. For topic 2, I'm going to try one of those." And she was quite methodical all the way through the module. So by the end, she'd built up a whole portfolio of different types of tool that she was comfortable with using. And I thought that was a really kind of professional way to do it if you've got no experience at all. And yes, okay, maybe it took a little while, and things built up, and her later posts looked a lot more variable than her early ones. But I thought she'd just taken a very mature and sensible approach to learning something completely different. So, and obviously some of you will have done it before. I know I can see from your blogs that some of you have had experience of it in the past. So everybody comes from a different point, and please help each other. There'll always be something that you can learn from a colleague and help out other people in exchange. How are we doing? Any questions?
And I'd like to add as well, just on the actual sort of content discussions, there seem to be, certainly the ones I've been looking at, some quite interesting discussions around the importance of the sort of social context and all the demographics and age, gender, and so on, education level, versus internal motivation and the sort of willingness to learn. And many students made the argument that if you have the right motivation, you can overcome your sort of social circumstances. And others, kind of slightly disagreed with that. I think overall it's probably worth thinking about this a little bit, because I understand the point that people are trying to make about motivation. You can sort of be a victim of your circumstances and say, well, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm in this situation. But in reality, if we take, for example, say a middle-aged mother in a particular sort of country and culture, where even having a mobile phone that's web enabled might be quite difficult, and certainly having a sort of free access to the internet through anything like a laptop does not happen. Coupled with that particular country may well have some restrictions on what the internet, what sites you can access from that particular country. And then actually there may be big issues in that particular country with, say, being in a rural area and having very bad web coverage, perhaps intermittent electricity, and so on. Almost no matter what your will, you are blocked by a lot of physical, social, economic and cultural barriers from being able to properly make the same use of the web as somebody, say, in Singapore or in the UK, from a different type of social background, a different culture, with a lot more privileges offline. So I think it's an interesting debate that people have been having on that, and it's one worth pursuing. But overall, my feeling on it is that there are actually quite a lot of socio-cultural barriers that no matter how hard you want to overcome them, you physically cannot. I mean, a big one of those is something like a disability. If you're blind, how can you use the internet as effectively as somebody who isn't? You know, you just can't. Even with the great technologies that can do a lot of screen reading stuff for you, even with keyboards that are based in Braille, you know, it's much, much harder for that person, no matter how much they want to be using it just as efficiently as someone who's full-sighted. They just physically cannot. So although motivation, I think, is a key factor, I don't think it's actually more important than the social aspects that the other social aspects that we've been talking about. That's my personal view on it, but it's an interesting discussion.
Yeah, no, that's I think a very valid point, Nick. Yeah, and one of the pieces that I marked had an interesting infographic where they showed, I think it was the top 4 countries in the world where internet access was deliberately restricted by the government. And it just had a little paragraph for each of those countries saying what sites were blocked and what restrictions were put on public use of the internet in that country. And you know, I thought that was a really good example. And yeah, it just highlights what Nick was saying, that, you know, sometimes if you've got that kind of restriction, there's very little difference that willpower can make. But
and in
yeah,
that situation,
okay.
in that sort of situation where you've got government blocks on websites and services, there will be some with the digital skills and literacies to be able to bypass those blocks. For example, by using a VPN to connect to a non-national based server. But there'll be other people who have no understanding at all, and this may be most people, who will have no understanding at all of what a VPN is or how to go around getting past those blocks. So that means that within that country, you end up with a digital divide, even within that particular age group. There might be those with the digital literacies to be able to access the full services of the web, basically in secret, and those who don't have the knowledge or skills to be able to do that. And immediately then you've got a digital divide, you've got digital differences. I thought there was a little bit, overall, many of the posts were a bit lacking in that particular aspect. It tended to be, a lot of people focused on age, which was a bit unfortunate, because obviously from the first introductory post, we know that it's not so much about age, it's about online behaviors and motivations and attitudes. And you didn't focus enough on the fact that even within groups of the same age in the same country, internet use is very, very different social circumstances. So Hugh Davies in the MOOC audio discussed the fact that in the UK, 17 and 18-year-olds in private schools from quite wealthy families were very good at using the internet for learning, but were really quite bad at using the internet for social media and for communicating and socializing. Whereas the same age group that came from lower socioeconomic backgrounds and went to a government-run school, they were the opposite. They were extremely good at using social media and about communicating and connecting with each other, but never really used the internet for any learning purposes. So there are these big and important digital differences, even within the same nation and the same age group. And I think most people missed that. And that was an important.
Yeah, I was going to make a very, very similar point, Nick. So thanks for raising that. Yeah, a lot of the ones I've read so far have focused on age, but without thinking back to the digital visitors and residents topic that we looked at, where we basically said, as Nick has just confirmed, that, you know, age isn't a critical factor. So it just illustrates an important point that will become easier to do as we go through the module, and that is that you should be making connections between the topics. They do overlap. They're not totally self-standing as a topic that doesn't relate to anything else that you do. And I think often the way that we teach in blocks mitigates against that. But it's a good practice to get into, that you think about when you're writing any post, you know, what can I bring in from what I did before that's relevant to this? So how do these two topics interrelate? What connections can I make? So yeah, I didn't really see any posts so far that really made a connection between the previous discussions we'd had about visitors and residents versus your current discussion about the age. So that's just one example where you could have made a direct connection, and there will be plenty more like that through the module.
Yeah, and another factor regarding age is that many people, and this is undeniable, there are fewer people in the 75 plus category regularly using the web than there are in the 16 to 25-year-old category. That's undeniable, but that is not necessarily a question of access. If we take the UK, for example, all the old people, if you want to put it like that, all the 75 plussers could access the web if they wanted to, i.e. the technology is available, the connections are available, the Wi-Fi is available, all of that is there. Some of you did draw the fact that therefore it must be a question of motivation, and that they don't see the value of the web, or they don't trust the web, or they don't have the need to use the web, and that's more the case. But you see, that is another reflection of their social context. You know, if you're a 75-year-old and all your friends and your children and your grandchildren are all on a WhatsApp group, for example, or are all using email to stay in touch, or Skype, there's a good chance that you will get online yourself. So that's not an access issue. It's not really a digital differences issue so much. That's an individual issue. It's all relevant to the discussion, and it's worth having that conversation. But age, just because fewer old people are online, doesn't automatically correlate that that's because they have less access. So, you know, again, I think that was a point that people didn't pick up on. Overall, what we're doing here, Lisa and I, in this discussion, is hoping to demonstrate to you when we talk about greater analysis needed in your posts, or more depth of understanding, this is the sort of thing that we're talking about. On the whole, most posts are getting quite close to this type of discussion without actually quite getting there. So that the web and how we relate to the web is a very nuanced, you know, very complex issue. So it's important for you to try and reflect some of the depth and some of the discussions in their full way when you post. That's obviously difficult to do in a limited word count, hence the reason why you use videos and graphics and slideshows and so on and so on, to try and present the real depth that we need. And this is why we're pushing you on the visuals.
Yeah, that's true. And obviously, you know, we've covered a lot of things in the last few minutes. We're not saying that you should put all of these points into your post, and you know, focusing on one particular aspect and going into depth in one aspect is fine. So, you know, don't feel as though you have to sort of cram a whole PhD into every single post. But yeah, some more evidence of depth of thinking would be good.
We've had a question.
Oh, go on.
Yep. It's not so much a question, it's some information. Sahana tells us that the blog can now be accessed, so it looks like the outage is resolved. Thank you, Sahana, for that. That's good news. Yes, that's a big relief. Yeah, the point I was just going to make kind of connects with the new topic 2, actually. I did notice that one or two of you in the post that I've marked had drawn out some rather old data to support the points you were making. There was one example in particular where somebody, I'm not going to say who it was, do name and shame, but somebody had used American internet access data from 2011 to make a point about how different people use the internet, or different types of people use the internet in different ways and for different things. And I thought, first of all, you know, why are we looking at American data here? I mean, unless the post itself is specifically about America in some way, why would you choose, out of all the possible sources of data, I would have thought, you know, either UK or Singapore data would be obvious examples. And also 2011, that is 6 years ago, which is a lifetime in internet terms. And I think if you did a comparison between the kind of demographics of how we used the web 6 years ago in any country versus now, it would be hugely different. So, you know, there's lots of information out there, and obviously what we're asking you to do in topic 2 is, you know, how do you sort out what to choose? Well,
getting up to date facts and figures is a good starting point. It's information that's readily available. There were lots of people that did manage to find some useful, relevant data from 2017, often from government sources in either Singapore or the UK. And yeah, obviously that's as good as it gets. But to kind of comment uncritically on information that comes from 6 years ago within a topic like this that's just changing so rapidly is really not doing you any favors. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that, and because I had a similar thing in my place. In fact, I actually had some data that came from 2009, and if you think about it, Facebook only started in 2007. Think about that. Facebook only started in 2007. Okay, and think about how global and how huge that Facebook is now, even if it's slightly on the decline with Instagram and Snapchat and so on taking over. But nevertheless, there's still billions of users on Facebook. It's only been around 10 years. This gives you some idea of the speed with which things change and the need for your sources to be as up to date as possible, especially statistical sources around web usage, web access, and that sort of stuff. But any statistical data. In the MOOC, there is a section around data literacy, which I would also draw people's attention to, because as Lisa said, it's okay finding some data, but if it's about the US or if it's about somewhere that you don't actually give it's not clear which country it's talking about, that information, that data becomes fairly meaningless. So if you're going to choose to give data about a particular country, you're going to need to justify why you've picked that country and how representative you think that particular country might be of the global picture. So in the MOOC, pay close attention to those steps we've asked you to look at, especially the ones around information literacy and data literacy, because sometimes the data or the statistics that you're choosing are either not up to date or not entirely relevant or useful. So yeah, as I say, pay close attention to that.
Okay, how are we doing on questions? Anything coming through?
No questions.
Have we got any pictures today? I haven't checked Twitter yet.
I like that one.
Just looking at Twitter a minute.
No, I've just been checking Twitter as well.
Oh, I've got a picture.
That by roughly lunchtime our time today, then all of the topic ones should be marked, unless you're one of the people who haven't done the commenting the self-assessment properly, or whose comments are missing and you haven't updated that. But otherwise, most of you should have your you should have our feedback by around midday our time. So that'll be about 8 PM your time.
Ah, we've got a picture. Excellent. Great. Yep. So we've got a picture which combines smiley faces and kind of a view out the window. So brilliant. Thank you for that. Oh, on a cup of coffee. Excellent. So yeah, and then those are older ones. Okay, great. So keep those pictures coming. There's a couple there so far. Right. Okay, I think I'm just checking my list. I think I've covered all the points I wanted to make. Was there anything else you wanted to add, Nick?
No, I think I've covered everything as well. Last shout for questions from everyone. So get your questions in quick, either through Twitter or on the chat.
Or any thumbs up or smileys, just to make sure we're connected.
Everything. Yeah, exactly. Give us a big grinning face.
Not too big. It is early. Okay, so just while there are any final questions coming through, just to reiterate the deadlines. So we're looking for your first topic 2 post by the end of today, then your comments by the end of tomorrow, and your reflections by the end of Friday, which fits quite neatly into the week for this topic, which is very fortunate. So it should all be clear to you now, having gone through the cycle, once, we're basically just doing it all over again. And then we do it all over again Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday next week.
Lots
A final
of smiley faces.
reminder. Oh, good. Excellent.
Yeah, lots of smiley faces.
Excellent.
Everyone seems happy today. That's good to see.
Good. I was just going to say a final reminder, don't forget as well the overarching second piece of assessment that is easily forgotten, but best not left till the last minute. As we keep saying, it's something that you should be thinking about and gathering evidence for and examples of all the way through the module. So if you are sat there thinking, oh, I'm all up straight, I've done my post, what do I do now? Don't forget you've got that other task to be drawing upon as well. Okay, any more questions coming through?
No, everyone seems very happy. Lots of good smiley faces. That's good to see.
Great. Excellent. Right, okay, well, we'll sign off for today then, and see you again same time tomorrow. The blog does seem to be back, which is fine. If there are any further issues with it, I'll make sure I tweet the link for tomorrow's session, but hopefully that was just a blip. And it might have been they were doing some maintenance on it or something. So it was certainly working last night. Right. Okay, so we're going to sign off then, Nick?
Yeah, we had a nice tweet
Reading
from Danielle, who says she's been rock climbing while listening to a lecture. I like the sound of that.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, that's
we definitely need a picture of that.
Yeah, we've got a picture of her lunch she's had afterwards. Should imagine it's quite hungry work, rock climbing and listening to a lecture at the same time.
And a nice big smiley face here, look.
Yeah, that's from Nirad. So, okay, everyone, great. Have a good evening.
Okay.
Right. I'll talk to you again on Friday.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye for now.